Immigrants coming to America not only face the difficult task of relocating their entire family and their life, but they also must face the difficulties of dealing with very stringent immigration regulations. Bruce Coane is attorney with the American Immigration Lawyers Association. He joins me this morning to give insight into the immigration process. I'd like to say welcome to Outlook Houston.
Good morning.
Tell me a little bit about the association.
The association is a national organization of over 5,000 lawyers here in the United States that practice in the field of immigration law. They also teach in the field. It includes professors of immigration law at various law schools. And they provide education for lawyers, support for lawyers. They publish books on immigration law, and they also do quite a bit of information and lobbying in Washington.
What would you say then is the primary concern as far as immigration is concerned right now?
Well, certainly the lawyers that represent both immigrants and employers in our country, those people are very concerned about legislation that tries to cut back on family immigration and tries to cut back on other lawful forms of immigration. And I think the other main concern is over the way that Congress has criminalized certain conduct so that folks who've been here for many years in a lawful status could now be deported from the United States even though they might have a green card for committing what are minor crimes or crimes that they may have committed 20 years ago. When the laws passed Congress, they said that individuals who are aggravated felons now should be deported from the United States even though they may have committed the crime. Definition of aggravated felons. So an individual that might have a couple DWIs might now be considered to be an aggravated felon, and folks like that are now appearing in the deportation courts even though they've lived here for many years, even though they have American citizen spouses and children, and those people are all, the government is trying to deport all of these people under these brand new immigration laws.
In your opinion, is there a shift by...
There's a real battle going on in Congress, and what they've done is they've categorized different types of immigrants. They have legal immigrants, illegal immigrants, people coming to join their families, and people coming for employment. And there's a real pull in Congress. On one hand, you have the Democrats that support family immigration, but many of them are against employment immigration because the Democrats have the support of the unions, and the unions don't want more workers coming in. But they do want families to come. On the other hand, you have many of the Republicans. They're so-so on family immigration. They're okay with family immigration, but they just want some tougher guidelines. On the other hand, they're very pro-business, so they strongly support business immigration. So
business immigration is someone who comes to the United States strictly to work in a particular job?
Correct. And companies like Microsoft and big oil companies, they're bringing in lots of foreign workers, usually to fill positions that otherwise can't be filled by American workers.
But they would not necessarily become a citizen of the United States, just an immigrant in order to do the work.
Right. There's two ways they can come to work. One is as an immigrant, someone who gets a green card and can remain in the United States actually indefinitely, although not necessarily becoming a citizen. And the other category that are coming in now are temporary workers, folks that can come for up to 6 years to fill a position, and it has to be a skilled position. And those folks are usually doctors, systems analysts, people in the computer industry, high-tech type workers.
So if I was someone who was living in another country and decided that it's time and I would like to move to the United States, what is the first thing that I need to do?
Assuming you're not immigrating based on a family relationship, if it's based on employment, that individual would need to find an employer in the United States who would sign papers and file the appropriate papers with the government agencies to sponsor that person or to bring them over as a worker. But the person does need to be skilled, and generally that means they need to have a diploma from a university.
But if I was bringing my whole family, what would I need to do?
If you want to bring your whole family, that means you would have to go to the Immigration Service, get the appropriate forms, or go to an attorney or to a volunteer agency, get the appropriate forms, and then file those forms with the Immigration Service.
At what point should someone, or what is the deciding factor of whether or not I can do the immigration process myself, or if I need an attorney to work with me?
I think the starting point, some people just go to an attorney just to find out how it works, and you could do that, or you could go to the Immigration Service and you can get the forms and then read the instructions to the forms, and if it looks like something that you can do on your own or you want to do on your own, you can go ahead and do that. But if it appears to be so complicated or so time-consuming that you just don't want to deal with it, then folks may go and see an attorney.
How has welfare reform affected immigrants in the United States?
It's been quite difficult on immigrants. It's affected, one of the problems is it affects legal immigrants, people who are living legally in the United States, they're working, they're having their taxes withheld. And a lot of those folks were taken off certain immigrant benefits, such as Social Security disability. So if they get disabled or they get hurt, they may no longer be able to collect disability, and I think they were taken off food stamps as well. And there is legislation now pending before Congress to bring some of these folks back on the rolls so that they can get re-enrolled in some of these programs, those who are lawfully living in the United States and paying the appropriate taxes.
Because most of the people who come to the United States do not necessarily go on aid. Isn't there a document that says that they have to sign that say that they will be able to support themselves when they come to the United States?
There are several ways of doing it. One is if they're immigrating based on family, then the family has to sign an affidavit of support promising to support the individual until he becomes a U.S. citizen. If they're coming based on employment, then presumably they have a job and they can support themselves. And that evidence has to be submitted to the United States Embassy abroad before the person is allowed to immigrate.
And in fact, if the family does sign that support document, that they are lawfully binded to support that family member, is that correct?
Yeah, that just became effective this year. Previously there was a form, but there was no way that the government could enforce it. But now they've turned it into a contract. And under that contract, yes, the family member who signs it remains liable, and the government can sue that family if the individual who immigrates applies for government benefits or receives government benefits.
Have there been any instances that you know of the government pursuing a family of a person who's gone on to aid?
Well, I've never seen it in my 16 years of immigration practice. And now with the new form, the Congress has made it clear that they expect the Department of Justice to go after folks who collect money, collect government benefits when there was an affidavit of support pending. So this is brand new, and Congress has indicated that they expect the Justice Department to go after these folks for reimbursement.
And are very serious about it. We've got to take a break, but when we come back, I'd like for you to walk me through the process. Once a person comes to the United States, exactly some of the things that they need to do when they get here. There's more about Look Houston right after these messages. Stay with us. Good morning and welcome back to Outlook Houston. Today we're discussing immigration, and we have Bruce Coane with us. And before the break, I'd asked that if you would discuss the entire process of once I come to the United States, what's the next step that I need to take?
Well, there's several ways you can come, but once you come to the United States, you've already been admitted and you've already received your visa from the U.S. Embassy abroad. So generally speaking, once you're here, you're all set, you don't need to do anything else. However, if you come as a non-immigrant, say as a tourist or as one of these workers where I said you can come for 6 years, if these folks decide that they would like to stay on permanently, or if they would like to switch from a tourist or a worker to become a student and go to the university here, then they have to go through an immigration process here in the United States, which would involve filing forms generally with the Immigration Service. And there's usually 2 places where you could file it. You'd either file it at your local immigration office here in Houston, or there's a lot of forms that are done by mail. And so you could pick the forms up at the immigration office in Houston, and then they would provide you with the address. It gets sent to Mesquite, Texas. And then you would submit those forms by mail. And once you mail them in, more often than not, they have a problem with the forms, and they'll tell you what the problem is, and they'll mail them all back to you and ask you to get whatever else it is that they want.
When someone comes to the United States, are there certain rights? I mean, like I know a person who is not a citizen cannot vote, but are there other rights that they are not able to have until they become a U.S. citizen?
Well, if they enter the United States with permission to work, then they pretty much have the same rights as everyone else. They're protected by the Constitution, and they have most of the same rights that people born here have. If they enter the United States as a non-immigrant, say as a student or as a tourist, then they don't have the right to work, and they don't have the right to engage in any sort of employment. They have to strictly stay under the terms that they were admitted. So if they were admitted as a student, they're supposed to be going to school. They're not supposed to be taking off for 6 months and seeing the United States. If they're admitted as a tourist, then they're not supposed to be going to school. And the Immigration Service is fairly strict on that.
Are there work permits that you can obtain in order to work?
Yeah, there's many ways in which to obtain a work permit, and again, you have to go back and look at the very complicated law to see how you might be able to qualify for a work permit. You can qualify, one, based on an employer sponsoring you. If the individual marries an American citizen, they can qualify to work that way. So there's a variety of different ways you can qualify.
You mentioned marriages, and you've heard people talk about people getting married in order to get their green card. How do you determine what is a legitimate marriage and one that would be suspicious? What are some of the red flags?
Well, it's really the job of the Immigration Service to determine if it's legitimate or not, but certainly lawyers that help folks really have no desire to participate in any case where there's a marriage of convenience or a fraudulent marriage. So, I mean, in our office, we just ask, is this a legitimate marriage? If we have any suspicions, we'll ask, is it legitimate? And the bottom line is the law requires that they got married because they're in love and they plan to spend the rest of their life together.
But what would make a relationship suspicious? If someone came to your office, what would send off a red flag for you?
Sometimes an age difference. If there's a man who's 21 years old and his wife is 60, that might set off some red flags. But a lot of lawyers just tend to believe whatever their clients tell them. And what we'll do is we'll say, because of the difference in age, this is going to be a red flag for the Immigration Service. And I just had a case where the man was in his 20s and his wife was 60. And so I told them that'll throw up a red flag for the Immigration Service, so give me some evidence about the validity of your marriage. And so they provide a wedding album and Valentine's cards that they've exchanged and things of that nature. And as long as they have that, I would indicate to them I think their case should be okay. But also, red flags go up when people of different races marry. Again, not in my book, but in the book of the Immigration Service.
So those are the sort of things that push their hot buttons.
Exactly.
We're out of time for this particular segment. I thank you so much for stopping by and giving us this important information.
Thank you.
There's more about Luke Houston after these messages. Stay with us.